Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a new episode of the Leadership Show. My guest today is Eric Verzuh. He is the best-selling author of the Fast Forward MBA in project management. He is also the president of the Versatile company. This is a firm that delivers training on project management topics to thousands of professionals. Its clients include Starbucks, Boeing, and General Electric. In other words, I can tell you that Eric Verzuh knows how to coach leaders. Together, we discussed project management and project leadership. Eric Verzuh gave me some advice on how to be a more people-focused leader. He also shared the best practices on how to measure performance in a project. This is a very exciting episode that I'm happy to share with you. So without further ado, let's start. Hello, Eric. Welcome to the Leadership Show.
Hey, thank you, Guerric. I'm happy to be here.
It is very nice to have you on the show, Eric. Let me start with my first question. You're known for the Fast Forward MBA in project management. Usually, MBA students want to become leaders. How is leadership linked to project management?
Okay, that's really a great place to start because all leaders are... Really, leadership is about getting a group of people to accomplish something together. Okay. Now, what we often so really being a good leader encompasses many disciplines, and so I would say that project management is a key subset of leadership. And another way of looking at it, we always tell people when I talk to them about project management is if you are a project manager, your first job is leadership, and the project management toolkit is there to help you figure out how to do a good job of that. Because if you're leading a team, you know what do team members want? They want some clarity about the goals. Team members want to know, what are we all here to do together? They want clear communication. And all of those things that team members want when they lead from their leader are things that project management as a discipline helps leaders do. Now, and if you think, for example, about the people who are MBA students and they want to be leaders, here's the other thing that project management helps people do, and that is if you want to have a great strategy, great strategy relies on excellent execution. And so to be a leader who can set clear strategy, but also who can help his teams translate that or her teams translate that into strong tactics and strong execution, that's another important part of leadership. So while leadership encompasses many different elements, project management provides, I think, a real strong foundation in sort of the nuts and bolts of how do we really execute together as a group.
Well, that's very interesting what you say. And you've coached many project managers and so leaders, as you say as well. Is there any surprising leadership style that you've seen?
That's an interesting question. I think that the most surprising thing for me is that the more people-focused a leader is, the more successful they are, and at the same time, because at the same, people want to be cared about, right? So people-focused leaders are important. And those who can balance being people-focused with having a certain rigor about being organized, that's the magic formula. Now, let's talk a little bit about styles, though. Here's the most interesting thing that I've experienced personally and that I've witnessed time and time again, and that is that there is a school of team dynamics that was first articulated 40 years ago by Bruce Tuckman, actually 50 years ago now, and it's called the Stages of Team Development. What it basically recognizes is that any group of folks that come together to work as a team, they're going to go through some common stages, and he called these 4 stages the forming, storming, norming, and performing. And I think what that means to the leader, though, is that as a leader, our style needs to adjust to match what the team needs at the time. And that means that when a team is just first forming, the leadership style needs to be very structured and directive, because people aren't ready to take it on themselves yet. But over the course of the project, as the team matures, the best project leaders evolve their leadership style to be more of a cheerleader, and we get out of the way and let the team take over leading themselves. So I think that the question you asked is there any surprising leadership style? And I think for me, what surprised me the most is how true these 4 stages of team development are over all teams, and how important it is for a leader to really recognize that what that means is that they need to change their own style from the time the program or the project begins and as it matures, because the team matures. And so therefore their own leadership style needs to get better with that. Or I shouldn't say get better, but adjust to what the team needs.
So one of your recommendations for leaders and project managers will be actually to be aware of these stages and to evaluate at which stage they are.
Right. My recommendation is for the team leader to be aware of this, stages of team development concept, so that they can be sensitive and be responding to the stage of the team. Think about it like a parent. If I'm a parent of a 2-year-old, it's really important for me to realize that all 2-year-olds go through that terrible twos, what they call the terrible twos. All 2-year-olds have a point when they want to rebel and they want to do things their own way, and what they really want is they want me to set some boundaries. And I just need to know that, so that I don't think my kid's going crazy. And I also need to know that as I'm raising a teenager, there's a time to let them make their own mistakes, right? And in the same way, there's a time as a leader that I want to be very strong and directive and tell people what we're doing. And there's other times as the team matures where I start backing off and I ask them what we should be doing. And I start to let them take ownership over planning and resolving issues. And I just become more of a cheerleader and a problem. I help them resolve obstacles and get things out of the way. But they really start to manage themselves as they become more mature. And I just need to make sure that I adjust my leadership style for what my team's ready for.
And is that only linked to the people, or is it also linked to the processes and the way the processes get more and more established over the time?
Good question. The team's processes, as the team becomes comfortable with their processes, then they're more capable of running them themselves. Absolutely. So it's up to me as a leader to put those processes in place and adjust the processes based on the feedback of the team as to what works. And then slowly the team takes over using those processes, and the processes become just more of a good habit. So that's really what we're looking for in all projects, are to establish good habits for communicating and good habits for track and scope and schedule and so forth, so that we're all on the same page and we're all comfortable.
And you've worked with many kind of businesses, from Fortune 500 companies to small and medium enterprises. What are the top teamwork challenges that you've seen in these organizations?
I think probably the most interesting teamwork challenges that you see, and this kind of goes back to what we were just talking about, but the most challenging teamwork is when people are reporting across boundaries. Because when you're reporting across boundaries, and I give an example of this from I met with a military team from another country several years ago, and they actually had people from the 4 services in their country. In the U.S., it's the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Marines. Well, in this case, they had a similar situation. They had a joint task force from these various service branches, and everybody on that team wanted to stay loyal to their own service branch while they're on this task force, because that's where they're going to go home to. And so the trick for the project leader there was to get them to be real bought into the goal of the team, and to start to bond with each other so that they could at least share their loyalty. They're not going to abandon their original functional loyalty to the group they're going to go home to, but they could at least share their loyalty to agree that what they were doing together was pretty darn important, and it was worth making compromises with their loyalty to their home function. And so the people from the Air Force, for example, were as committed to the joint goal that they had on this team as they were to the goals of the Air Force that they knew they'd go back to. And let's be honest, they're going to have to go back and answer to their friends back in the Air Force or back in the Navy. And so they're going to have to be able to justify all the decisions that they made. But that became really job one of the team leader, was to get them to really internalize the goal of that team so that they could commit to it and make hard choices that force them to compromise the values of these various branches.
So it goes back to what you said about clarity of goals and clear communication. You also mentioned being people-focused. It sounds easy to do, but in practice, it's quite difficult. What do you recommend in this case?
How do you become people-focused? That's a great question. One of the tools that we use and that we teach people to use is just a simple assessment that helps people understand their own preference when they're working with a group. And some people tend to be really task-oriented, knowing what are we here for and who's responsible, and get that task done and make sure that task is done correctly. And on the other end of the spectrum, some people are very people-focused, and they're really about making sure that we have the relationships intact and that everybody who's a part of the team really it feels good about their role. And both of these things are important. And I think that the best leaders they act consciously about that. So they know that their own style preference might be to be task-oriented, but they also know that people in the group need to be honored and need to feel cared about. And so they consciously set aside time in their calendars to talk to people. They consciously choose that to evaluate people's sense of belonging to the group. For example, when we measure project success, quite often we focus on are you on time and are you on budget. But not too many project leaders actually ask their team to assess, do you trust the leaders? Do you feel like your contributions are being valued? Do you feel like we've got a process that is efficient? And so I would recommend that leader actually consciously choose a certain amount of time out of their leadership week or out of their week to ask themselves about how they're treating the people on the teams as much as are we getting the work done. And what's amazing about this, and we work with a company called the Effectiveness Institute in Redmond, Washington, and as I was talking about this with their president, he said that his experience was that if you pay attention to the health of the team, and the team is healthy, you can limit your attention to that to maybe 15% or even 10% of your total effort of working on a project. But if the team isn't healthy, you're going to spend 50% of your time working on that. So it's, there's many things that make us people focused, but I would say that as the leader, if I start with attending to people focus, making sure there's trust, open communication, that people have a sense of purpose and value on the team from the beginning, and they understand what the goals of the team are, all the things that make people bond to the project, that I'm going to be able to spend 15% of my time being people focused and 85% of my time being, problem solver and task focused and driver to make things happen. And the team will be healthy. But if I don't start out strong with a people focus, all those problems pop up, and I spend half my time dealing with that until I get it under control.
Taking into account what you just said about working with people, how do you create the right project management processes with your team?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. So on one level, when you talk about project management processes, this is a big topic because what the right processes for each project team are can vary. But I think what really helps is when you're in an organization that actually has some common practices among projects. Because if I'm fresh to a new company and I want to manage a project and I see around me that there are no standards, well, I've got to put some in place, and I've got to try to get everybody oriented to the standards that I'd like to use, and we probably negotiate a little bit about what's really going to work and what software tools we're going to use. But, if instead I walk into an organization and they say, Eric, these are the standards that we all use, then I just learn their vocabulary or their culture of project management. And so I think probably the most important thing is, if possible, establish a standard practices, a standard of culture, a common vocabulary of project management within an organization. And that's what really makes it easy for every project manager and every project team to have realistic practices, because they already have that experience and you're not trying to invent it on every project. And I want to make a specific reference to a company that's done that. That's the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And they hired a couple of years ago a guy named Don Kingsbury, who'd had experience in a number of large companies like HP setting up project management practices. And so Don has come in and built up some very straightforward standards around project management. And I specifically reference this because this story about what Don's done at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is in the newest edition of my Fast Forward MBA in Project Management. So if somebody would like to read more about really what specifically you can do to create what I think is a sufficiently complex but not overly complex set of standards, I think Don Kingsbury's done a good example of that, and that's why I included that example in my book. I think that the other key point that you want to address when you're trying to establish these standards is realize that what it's really about is it's really about a rhythm of project management. You want to build good habits. And so there's some really basic things that every project team needs. But I think the smart project manager knows that most people don't want to be as rigorous and systematic as they need to be. So a good project manager is going to push them to be a little more rigorous, a little more systematic, and develop those good habits. And over time, everybody will be glad they've got good practices and that they track their issues on a regular basis, and they've got a list of risks that they're tracking, and they update that on a routine basis, and they're constantly reviewing the schedule on a regular basis. People will appreciate that over time, but it's not always the first thing that a team member wants to do, because team members show up to work on that project. They want to do the work, and project managers are focused on organizing the work. And so there can be a little tension between that. But as long as a project manager is well organized and makes all of these project management activities relatively efficient over time, I think people on the team appreciate what they're doing and they buy into that.
That's very interesting. And talking about organization, is there anything leaders and project managers can learn out of the Agile methodology?
Oh, yes, Agile. That's a really interesting question. It's a good topic. So the Agile methodology came out of the software world, and now it's being used actually in other disciplines, not just software development. I think the first thing that's really important to understand about Agile is that Agile is an approach to iteratively developing a product, which is different than project management. Project management is about understanding what is the work and developing ways to organize the work, clearly communicate responsibilities, clearly measure is work getting done. So Agile is a development approach, and good project managers right now are learning a couple of key things from Agile. I think, first of all, the most important thing to learn from Agile is that if you want to do something fast, the fastest, least expensive way to do it is to do it with high quality. And I think sometimes that's not always the major focus. But when you want to be fast and you want to be inexpensive, do it right the first time, because fixing problems over and over later on is what drives the cost through the roof. So one of the things that Agile has done is it's helped people get very solid feedback quickly from customers on, are we delivering something that's working for you? Are we delivering something that's going to work? And the faster we get that feedback, the quicker we can do course corrections on, are we delivering the right thing? And so that's a really valuable takeaway from the Agile development techniques. I think that the other really great takeaway for every project manager from Agile development techniques is a huge focus on the customer and listening and getting the customer to actively look at what we're doing and give us feedback as we're developing. The biggest mistakes that have been made, prior to Agile was to talk to the customer a lot and then kind of shut them out of the process and shut them out of the project. And then later on say, here's what we've got. How do you like it? And of course, if they didn't like it, it's really late. Now what do we do, right? We're going to have to do all this rework, and that's what's expensive. So, but I think that the other piece of that's we can really take away from Agile is that as project leaders, sometimes we're faced with pieces of work that we can break down and we don't have to do it all at once, and there's some flexibility into how much we deliver. And so the Agile methodology gives us some new tools for breaking our work into really small pieces, doing it and showing it to the customer and getting feedback, and then actually letting them use it. That's the other thing that Agile does, that it forces us to think differently about how do we incrementally deliver something that's useful, that a customer can actually put to work and actually get something out of. And I like that because it forces me to think in a new way.
And you talked about being fast and inexpensive. We also talked before about being people-focused and about trust. How do you measure the performance and the progress in a project? What are the right metrics for that?
Okay, yeah. The right metrics for tracking progress, it's really an interesting question. Let me just say, first of all, the thing that the biggest mistake that people make in progress and tracking progress. So the biggest mistake that I see in projects, and this actually doesn't happen necessarily from the project manager or the project team, but from executives higher up. And the biggest mistake is that we measure project costs using traditional accounting cycles. So if you've got a 2-year project, and in the first year you ask how much money was spent, and if they've spent, let's say, less than half the budget in the first year, people say, great, you're under budget. But what that misses, the point that misses, is we don't know. We have no idea what was accomplished. And so the biggest mistake that happens is that traditional accounting cycles and traditional accounting basically captures how much did we spend in a time period, like a month or a quarter or a year, but it doesn't attach that expense to what was actually accomplished. And so when it comes time to measuring performance, the trick here is to be able to break the big picture down into small increments, small units of work that we really can evaluate and say, yeah, this unit of work was done, it was done correctly. And when I can look at whether something was done correctly, then I can also ask, how much time did I spend on that, and how much money did we spend on it? And finally, that's really that gives us the opportunity to track cost and schedule and relate it to the quality of what's been delivered. So that's the trick. Now, and so if you can break what you're doing down into those increments, then really there's a number of tools and techniques that are available. On the largest kinds of projects that are very linear, like if I'm building a highway, we can use techniques that are called earned value. And it gets kind of complicated, but we basically attach money and time to every mile of highway that we build and ask how long did it take to build that highway and how much money did it take to build that stretch of highway. But when we're doing other kinds of projects, again, the trick is still to be able to break it down into those basic units. And the tools, I will tell you that the tools of project management, and there are many good software tools when it comes to project management, but they're all based on that idea that if I can break down this big chunk of project work into small increments that I can look at each one and know that one increment was done and done correctly, then I'm in shape to be able to track what's actually being done. And that's a bit of it becomes a bit of an art to do that, frankly, and that's where experienced project managers and experienced estimators really come in and show some of their stuff.
Eric, how can the listeners connect with you? Where can they find you online?
Hey, I would love to have any of the listeners attend our free monthly webinars. Every month we deliver a 1-hour webinar on some project management topic, things from estimating to innovation to high-performance teams to Microsoft Project. And you can go to our website, which is www.versatilecompany.com, and attend our free webinar. You can also, when you get to that website, you'll see how to contact me if you have any questions about project management you'd like to talk about, or you can contact me directly, Eric.Verzuh at versatilecompany.com. And of course, if you'd like to hear more or know more about what I think about project management, my book, The Fast Forward MBA in Project Management, the 5th edition, is just out now. It's just fresh to the bookshelves and bookstores, and you have access to that. It's probably got everything that you want to know about project management and a little bit more in it.
Eric, thank you so much for being on this show.
Hey, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.